Welcome to the Lean Solutions Podcast, where we discuss business solutions to help listeners develop and implement action plans for true lean process improvement. I am your host, Patrick Adams. Hello and welcome to the Lean Solutions Podcast. My guest today is Glenn Wilson. Glenn is a management consultant specializing in DevOps, Agile, and security. He is the founder of Dynaminet and holder of a certified information systems security professional. We'll learn more about that shortly. He is also the best-selling author of the book DevSecOps, a leader's guide to producing secure software without compromising flow, feedback, and continuous improvement. Welcome to the show, Glenn.
Hi, Patrick. It's a pleasure joining your show. It's been a follower of your show for a while, so thank you for inviting me along.
Yeah, it's good to see you again, Glenn. Glenn and I were both in Japan together not too long ago, so catching up is always good with a few of the other people that were with us in Japan, and so I'm looking forward to this conversation, Glenn. Before we dive into DevOps, which is what I'm excited to hear a little bit more about. How are you feeling with your return from Japan? Have you? It's been a while yet now, but actually, since Japan, you've actually been in the U.S. as well, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I live in UK in Canterbury in Kent. I've been back about 2 or 3 weeks from Japan, and then I travelled out to the USA where I visited upstate New York. So I basically went to the International Boxing Hall of Fame induction weekend, which I've been going to for the last 13, 14 years. Yeah, back in the States. And to answer your question, so coming back from Japan, I mean, it was an amazing experience to go to Japan. Yeah. It's been on my bucket list for a long time. I think I joked while I was out there that on my bucket list I had an item that said to eat sushi in Tokyo. And I had to wait 3 or 4 days before I could do it, but but Japan was an amazing experience, organized by Katie Anderson, and it was a great experience. I recommend it to anybody who has an interest in Japanese ways of working to go along to one of those. Definitely.
Absolutely. Glenn, what would you say was your, if you could pick one highlight or, even a couple different points in Japan that you feel like are worth sharing, what would be the two or the one that comes to mind? So, an aha moment or something that you say, this is something that really impacted me in a big way when we were there.
Yeah. So for me, I think seeing exactly how things are done. I've read a lot. So I've read Mike Rodder, I've read Jeffrey Leiker, I've read Katie Anderson, and I've read a lot of books like that on the Toyota production system. I've even gone back to read Taiichi Ohno and Shingo Shigeo. So I've read a lot, but that doesn't necessarily mean I've experienced it. I've experienced some elements of it within some of the organizations that I've worked for, but being able to go to Japan and actually seeing it in action, and the way it's done in Japan as well, it's a thoughtless process. It is ingrained into the way that they do things, and I think that was such a big takeaway for me is understanding that it is part of the Japanese culture. So I know we've seen organizations in the UK, and I've worked with a couple of them that have ways of working that are similar to what we saw, but it's not ingrained into the culture as such. But yeah, that was a big takeaway for me. I think another takeaway for me was I just remember seeing those children. Well, we went to an elementary school or a primary school, as we say in the UK, and we saw some children cleaning the school. Now it's just a typical school in Japan, typical school. Yeah. In other words, every school in Japan, their children clean the school. They have no janitors in the schools, right. And that to me shows that there's an element of respect. But what that also taught me, I work in security, and security is possibly a subset of quality, or the two very much overlap. And it just made me realize, actually, if you build security or quality into your daily lives, then you've got the opportunity to actually build products and deliver services that are more secure, because it's just ingrained into the way you do things. And I think that was another massive takeaway for me as well. However, we've missed the boat on that in the Western culture. We don't have children clean the school, and we have to
Mm.
teach the stuff when when people enter organizations. And I think that's something which we still need to work on in the Western culture, and that's something we can't take from Japan. That's something we've got to work out for ourselves here in the West.
Right. Yeah, it's so true. It's funny that you used that example. I just recently had Stephanie Oliver on, who was also with us in Japan, and she gave the exact same example of going to the schools and said that was the one thing that was really a huge impact for her too. And I would agree. I just think when you think about what the Toyota production system and the workers when they were growing up in Japan, I mean, they were engulfed in a very specific culture that then helped enable a lot of what we now know is the success that came with the Toyota production system. And it's just really interesting to see how all of those different things that we experienced with the younger generation in Japan, how that rolled over then when we went and visited some of the different production facilities that we went to. Pretty amazing stuff for sure.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about DevSecOps. This is an area where you wrote the book, and for those that are listening in that don't know what a certified information system security professional, or think you say CISSP, right? What is that? And then let's talk about DevSecOps, and what is DevSecOps, and what is the problem that you're trying to solve?
Yeah, so CISSP, and that's basically what I am, a certified information system security professional. It's basically somebody who's qualified with ISC squared, an organization or certification organization, to show that you have not only the depth of knowledge of security, but the breadth of knowledge of security. So there are 8 domains that you need to be aware of, and you need to be pretty proficient at each of those domains to pass the exam. It's more for the management level, and a lot of CISOs here that I am aware of tend to go down the route of gaining a CISSP qualification. And it was just something I was interested in doing at the time. So taking the CISSP was one part of it. But it's interesting that there's a lot of stuff in the CISSP that is not quite, it doesn't quite match what we need to do in DevSecOps. So CISSP is very much based on information security done in a handover type way, in a waterfall type process. And this is where the challenge is, and this is what DevSecOps is trying to solve, really. So DevSecOps, it's a merging of different types of philosophies. So you have an Agile philosophy, which obviously that's in there, it knows about Agile, knows that there was the Agile manifesto that came out in 2001. Prior to that, you had people like Kent Beck, who was designing something called test-driven development, which was about writing tests first and developing the software afterwards. So it's almost like if you want to look at the PDCA cycle, isn't it? It's like you're planning what you want your application to do. You write your tests. You then write the code that fixes the tests, and then you look to see what's happening there. So there's a PDCA type iterative process going on there. And then out of that came Agile and Scrum, I think, as well, predates Agile. But these things fed into the Agile manifesto. The Agile manifesto is designed by developers for developers. So it was a great set of values, 4 values and 12 principles. And it was really good for developers to actually understand how they can develop software in an iterative way. So it solved the problem of designing up front, developing, and then waiting several weeks for test results to come back, and that would cause problems. And because once you've got the test results back, you might have moved on to another project, or you might have forgotten what you were working on, or worst case scenario, the developers have left the company, and that especially if they're contractors, which we've seen before. So DevOps, it was more like an evolution from the Agile. So rather than just doing development in following the manifesto, a tool for developers by developers. We brought in the operations side of it. So the idea is that a developer not only develops a product, but then maintains a product. So we're not handing it over the wall to a set of operations people to manage it, and then creating the same sort of problems where operations people will find problems, throw them back to developers, but it could be weeks after the event and you've forgotten the code. So the idea is to bring development and operations together into a continuous thread or continuous pipeline into development. It's going into the build process. So basically, developers to code, they test it, they create the code for the environment, or even the operations team create the code for the environment. They're continuously working together side by side in order to create this seamless migration from design through to production and then into maintenance. Now, so DevOps was aligning development and operations, but then security got a little bit left behind. So security was now in a situation where they are siloed out of the whole process. Traditionally, and this is what the CISSP teaches you, that as a security person, you'd want to come in and do some threat modeling on the design of your application. You then want to look at the code and do code reviews and review the code. And then you'd want to do some testing, some penetration testing. Now, all of these have time lags, and you're handing the code, you're handing over to security to do the work, which slows the development and operation side down. It means that they can't progress the work as quickly as they wanted to. So the whole idea of DevSecOps then was to bring in some processes to try and make this a little bit more seamless, but in a secure way. So we introduced things like automated security testing. So we have static analysis and dynamic analysis, which look at your source code and try to identify potential weaknesses within your source code. We have software composition analysis, which looks at third-party libraries that you're introducing into your code to make sure that they don't contain vulnerabilities, because that's a massive problem we have in security. And that sort of like eliminates some of the need for penetration testing. We still do need penetration testing, but it means that we can progress a little bit more quickly, and produce code and produce products and services with a fair amount of security baked into what we're doing, without having to hand stuff over to security. And that's what DevSecOps is trying to solve, really, is that problem of aligning DevOps and security.
Makes sense. Yeah. And obviously, I mean, a lot of what you're talking about is outside of my threshold of knowledge. That's why we have people like you. But I know Lean, I know continuous improvement, I know Agile. So obviously a lot of those things that you're talking about, driving the learning up front, working together to drive out some of those hidden assumptions and really develop, have something that's being developed that is going to be the right end product. And now, like you said, bringing in security, because obviously that's important as well, especially today's world with, all of the issues that we have. And obviously technology is just, things are changing continuously. So obviously I can see the value in that. But, I think about with the designing, these different digital products that, are going out, regularly, and there's all these updates that are happening on a continuous basis. How does Lean work into that? What do digital organizations need to understand about Lean, and how do they all come together? What are the important pieces that, that can be learned when we put them together? Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. So the way I look at it is Lean is about reducing waste. Again, when we was in Japan, we saw these amazing robots that eliminated waste. We saw the single minute exchange of die in actually working, which I always find fascinating, the story behind that. And it's like it's very similar to what you see in security, right? So in security, we've had moments where it's taken a security professional several hours or maybe even days to do a penetration test of a product or service. and then to find defects. What we really want to do is find those defects really quickly. We want to find them as a developer is pretty much writing the code, or soon after. So reducing that waste of time of sending code to or sending products over to another team to do the testing actually at the point of when you're writing the code is very important. I think that's something we've learned from Lean. I think also having the tools around you as well. We talk about the 3 S's, or the 5 S's, and it's quite difficult to put that into context of software development. But I look at it like this and think that, well, we've got the tools around us in terms of the software that the development environments we're using. They're accessible. We know what they look like. We integrate extensions into those IDEs so that we can test our code. So it's all there in front of the developer. So the developer doesn't have to go elsewhere outside of the team or outside of his IDE even to do the testing, and to pull in the right elements. I mentioned earlier, third-party software. All they need to do is just go to something like GitHub, pull in an open source library, and that might solve a problem they have. So and the problem they might have, it could be, there could be loads of different open source pieces of software that solves that for them. So rather than writing it themselves and wasting time doing that, they put in that extra code. So I think that's where Lean can become a little bit more beneficial to software security. There is one thing I want to touch on though, which is about how perhaps some of those solutions have created other problems, which we probably need to address in cybersecurity. But I'm happy to come on to those a bit later. But yeah, for the moment though, that's I think how we can learn from the Lean movement and understand what we're trying to do. When we think about DevOps itself, DevOps has 5 principles. The first principle is locality and simplicity. So we don't want to have to waste time in terms of going up the organizational hierarchy to the head of a team, to then comes back down to another team so that we can get permission to do something. So you think about that in security. If I want to write a piece of code or develop a feature, I don't want to have to go to my manager, who then goes to his manager, then brings it up at a board meeting, he then does
Right.
And then we've got to wait there for that. Yeah. So locality and simplicity. I should be able to make autonomous decisions at my level, at the local level. That's important. So that's the first principle. The second principle is focus, flow, and joy. So that's the whole idea that we are not having to wait on anybody. Again, that shows that we're looking at Lean principles here, and the word joy is quite important there, right? Because when we was in Japan, joy was a word that came up over and over again. Whenever we went to an organization, it was one of their missions was to bring joy into the workforce, bring joy to their customer. They weren't satisfied with customer satisfaction. They want customer joy. They want the customer to go out and proclaim that this is the best product in the world, to almost become a partner. So joy is an important thing. We want that for our developers, right? We want our developers to feel that joy when they're writing code. They don't want them to sit there all frustrated because they can't do what they want to do. So that's the second principle. The third principle is improvement of daily work. Now that is Kaizen. That is absolutely Kaizen. It's about bringing in improvements into everything we do on a daily basis. So that could be bringing in automation. It could be introducing something called pair programming so that 2 developers can work side by side. And although that sounds like it's wasteful in the sense that you've got 2 developers working on the same keyboard, actually it's been proven to be more effective at reducing waste there, because you almost got a validation of the code almost as soon as you're writing it.
Right.
So the fourth principle is psychological safety. So that is being able to raise questions, challenge the status quo, I guess, and not feel afraid of it, and being able to bring in new ideas without repercussions. So again, that's taken from that lean culture and the whole idea of, that anyone can bring up an idea. Again, when we was in Japan,
one of the companies, I can't remember which one it was, basically said that each of the developers has, or sorry, each of their engineers has around 100 ideas every year.
Yes.
So that's 2 a week ideas,
Right.
And there's no fear there. There's no fear of coming up with something silly or something stupid. Everything is validated. Everything is given a chance. And quite often it's just the engineer himself who implements it, or the small team around them. So that's the fourth principle. And then the last principle is customer focus. So that speaks for itself, really, is that we're developing this for the customer. And we need to think about the customer. For me, security is an area where the customer focus, we sometimes forget that. We quite often hear about we don't want to breach a data breach because we don't want to damage our reputation. We don't want to lose our financial status. We don't want stakeholders to abandon us or shareholders to abandon us. It's very much about the organization. Whereas what I think we should be looking at is customer focus, in the sense that we're actually looking after the customer's data, the customer's financial information, and we need to be very much aware of that and protecting our customers. It's not about reputational damage. It's not about our financial gains or losses. It's about our customers. And customers can be affected severely by breaches. They could end up losing a lot of money. They could end up being very badly embarrassed. And we have heard of people that have ended up taking their own lives as a result of security breaches. So it's something we need to take seriously. But they're your 5 principles of DevOps, and a rough guide as to how they sort of like marry up to the lean principles. Not fully, but certainly there is a little bit of overlap.
Hey everybody, this is Patrick. So sorry to interrupt this episode of the Lean Solutions Podcast, but I have an important question. Are you tired of the old ways of doing business? Feeling overwhelmed by inefficiencies and wasted resources? It's time to transform your approach and embrace the power of lean methodology. Welcome to our revolutionary Lean Solutions Academy with courses on lean methodology. Whether you're a seasoned executive or just starting out, our courses are designed to equip you with the knowledge and skills that you need to streamline your operations and maximize your success. Our courses are packed with actionable strategies and real-world examples to help you apply lean principles to your own business. You'll learn how to optimize your workflows, reduce lead times, and deliver value to your customers more efficiently. From value stream mapping to 5S methodology, Six Sigma courses, Lean Six Sigma Yellow Belt, Lean Six Sigma Green Belt, Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, we cover all the essential tools and techniques used in Lean. You'll gain a deep understanding of waste identification, continuous improvement, and problem-solving methodologies. Our online platform allows you the flexibility to learn at your own pace from anywhere in the world. With high-quality video lessons, interactive quizzes, and downloadable resources, you'll have everything that you need to succeed. By enrolling in our Lean courses, you gain a competitive edge, increasing your operational efficiency and unlocking your business's true potential. Join the ranks of successful change agents who have embraced Lean and revolutionized their organizations. Enroll today and you'll get $100 off your first course, which practically pays for any of our e-learning courses. We want to make it so easy for you to jumpstart your Lean journey. Don't miss out on this incredible offer. Visit our website now and claim your discount at www.findleansolutions.com/academy. Now, back to the show. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I can definitely see the connection for sure. And in a lean organization, we're trying to create a learning culture, right? That's continuously experimenting, that they don't have fear of failure, that they're learning things, they're reflecting, they're learning continuously. What does that look like for in cybersecurity? Going through those 5 principles, it sounds like there has to be some intentional learning that's embedded in each of those. What exactly would that look like, for you in cybersecurity?
It's an interesting question because I think DevOps and DevSecOps is still relatively new. I wrote my book 3.5 years ago, and it's still very new, it's still very fresh, and it's still evolving. But there's one element that I did actually mention in my book, which is security chaos engineering. And that's probably the closest to a learning organization. So the whole idea of this is that we are afforded the opportunity to run experiments that test certain theories about the security of our systems, services, and our products. So, and the whole idea is that we come up with these theories, we experiment, and then with the experiments, when there's a failure, we can then try to work out how to resolve the problem. And that in theory will strengthen the whole system. But also by strengthening the whole system, we also have the opportunity to learn about our systems, because our systems become very complex. There's a lot of complexity built into it. We've got multiple components now, all integrating with each other. We've got different teams all working across many different geographies, but working on the same, what the customer sees as the same product. But they're made up of multiple components. So that complexity, it becomes impossible really to hold that knowledge in your head. And so in order to learn our way through it, we need to start understanding, the resilience of our system and how resilient we are to cybersecurity. So, for example, we could take you might have a credential that allows us to access a database, and that credential might have admin rights. If we reduce those to read only, does it break anything? Well, that's what we really want, is that to be read only, but it might break something elsewhere in the system. So what does it break? Well, we're going to learn something about the system because that has broken something somewhere. Or if it doesn't break it, then that's great as well, because we've learned that actually we can change that parameter and it doesn't affect what we're doing. So either way, we're still learning, whether learn from failure or learn that we've actually don't have to have that level of privilege for that particular account. So we can build that type of resilience into our products, or robustness into our products, but we also build resilience into our workforce as well, because the more failures that they're having to deal with on a regular basis, they sort of become more acclimatized to failure, and can therefore deal with it when a proper security incident occurs. They'll be able to think about how to do it. They'll be able to think out of the box. And I like to use the analogy of a firefighter. So a firefighter, here in the UK, quite often at a fire station, you'll see like a 4 or 5 story mock-up of a building, and firefighters practice on that regularly. I don't know how often, but certainly it's regularly. And they'll go through other drills of like, kitting out their fire engines, getting ready to go to an emergency, and then packing it all away, and because it's just a drill. Now, they keep on doing that on a regular basis, but every time they go out to a real incident, they have no idea what they're going to face. It is completely unique every single time, but they know how to deal with it. They know what to do, not because they've seen it explicitly like that previously, but they draw on the experience from all the drills they've done. And I think with security chaos engineering, we can offer the same sort of opportunity by allowing our engineers that are developing the systems to practice over and over again different scenarios to build that resilience, that knowledge and experience, and learning how we can develop and create opportunities for improving our systems and reducing the risk to our systems, but through this practice. So I'm a big advocate of security chaos engineering, and I think that is where the learning is probably going to be at its, is where learning should be, basically.
Yeah, makes sense. Glenn, are you familiar with Menlo Innovations and Rich Sheridan? Have we talked about that?
Yes, I am familiar with yes, you might have to remind me, but I'm familiar with them. I know that they've developed software, and they take an experimental approach to developing software. I think
they do, and they also use 2 programmers too on everything that they do. So and also the CEO of Menlo wrote the book Joy Inc. and talks about joy in the workplace and stuff. So it's like everything you're talking about is like completely aligning with my friend Rich Sheridan and the work that they do at Menlo. But I only say that because I was thinking about, you're talking about security and zero defects and, these different things that, would be kind of the output or the ultimate goal of having, good processes in place to code. And I think about what Rich does with two programmers, and then I hear what you're saying, and I have to ask the question: is it possible to have zero defects? Even possible? I mean, obviously that's what we want, right? And that's why we're putting some of these things in place. That's why you're talking about simplicity. That's why you're talking about Kaizen, these different things. Is it even possible to have zero defects?
It probably isn't, but it should be an aspiration, right? We should be aiming for zero defects. One thing which I find, and this is what I was alluding to earlier, is that we create with these tools that we've integrated into our delivery pipelines that discover vulnerabilities within our code. What happens is, because we run them on code that's never been tested before, we generally tend to find lots and lots of vulnerabilities. I've seen cases of 5,000-10,000 vulnerabilities that are identified through running these tools. Now, a vast majority of those are going to be false positives, right? So it's very difficult for a developer to sit through them all and fix them all. So what we generally tend to do is pass that vulnerability onto the customer, because we can't fix them all. What we try to do is prioritize them. We work out which ones are critical, which ones are low, and then we work on the critical ones, and then we just let the low ones pass through. So effectively, we're passing a known defect onto our customer. I feel that what we need to be doing is looking at ways to address the vulnerability management problem that we have in cybersecurity. And it's not about reducing a number of vulnerabilities to zero, because we can't do it. However, if we set as a North Star that we want zero defects, then we need to look at ways of doing that. And the sort of things that I can imagine that we should be doing is, rather than just running a scan across the whole of our code, let's just start building the knowledge within our development team and say, okay, we think we might be vulnerable to these types of defects because we have a database. So we might be vulnerable to SQL injection. We might be vulnerable to some access control type vulnerabilities. So let's just introduce testing for those two elements and just test that our code is actually okay or not. So we can develop a more considered approach to running those scans. And by doing that, we're in control of the vulnerabilities. Now, people will say, yeah, but what about all the vulnerabilities you've got because you haven't run the scans? Well, but we're no different to what we were when before we integrated the application security testing tools in the first place. We're no different. So let's work with what we do have knowledge of, and start to develop ways to reduce vulnerabilities that way. Because what's happening at the moment is spawned out by the fact that we see as a website that shows you all the different, or a paper report comes out annually that shows you the state of security in the UK organizations, and it's showing that we're having an increasing number of defects. The cost of the defects is increasing, and we need to do something about that, right? So DevOps has been around now for probably about well, it was first coined in 2009 at a conference in Ghent, but I think companies have really started to pick it up on it since about 2015-16 when the DevOps handbook came out. And I think after that, it's become a little bit more prevalent, but we're not seeing a reduction in the number of breaches. So something's not aligned. Something needs to change. And I think that we need to look at how we manage our vulnerabilities and how we focus on those vulnerabilities, because in amongst all those vulnerabilities, there's going to be low rated vulnerabilities that are actually critical, and we don't know that yet. because they've not been exploited. But once they're exploited, we could be in a whole lot of trouble. So let's be a bit more smarter about how we integrate these tools into our pipelines and how we configure them to detect the right types of vulnerabilities.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And obviously you talk about the vulnerabilities and being a current threat as well as a threat into the future. I mean, I just think about, technology, all the advancements in technology, all these different organizations who have in the past, maybe they didn't have all the digital tools, all the, digital products, and now they're embedding those into their systems, and just so many uncertainties, as we go forward into the future. I mean, do you see opportunities for organizations to become more resilient, or do you see those threats and vulnerabilities continuing to just destroy companies, or what do you see for the future, I guess?
Yeah, I think I see for the future, I think we're going to see improvements. I think there's a lot of movement towards improving the way we do security. The application security testing and cloud security testing and all this sort of stuff, when you look at the number of companies out there doing this stuff at the moment, there are thousands of them. And I believe that there's some good ideas out there. There's some great initiatives that are in place. And I'm a big believer that the cream will rise to the top. I think we will start seeing some real good advancements in the technologies to improve the security. I think some of the cloud providers themselves, like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, I think they are also producing some really good initiatives to reduce the risk of security breaches. And just recently, Amazon, for example, they changed the configuration of what you call their S3 bucket. S3 bucket is a storage location located on the cloud. Previously, you would have had to configure it to be more secure. Now its default is to be very secure. You need to relax it slightly if you want it to do different things. But so I think some of the cloud providers are going to be producing better resilience, but we still have the challenge that there are certain parts of security that the cloud providers are not responsible for. We're still responsible for within the organization. I think security awareness is going to increase over time because it has become more and more popular in terms of it's in the daily news. We hear about security breaches. I know in the USA there's been a lot of talk recently about making companies reduce their security risk. We've had the President Biden actually releasing some mandates recently about S-bombs. We've had similar sort of legislation in the UK. So I think we are going to see some improvements, but also we're facing more challenges. I mean, the threat from state actors such as Russia, China, North Korea, they are huge. North Korea, for example, they probably have a whole army of hackers that are fully trained, highly experienced, very skilled, and they're working all around the world. And when you hear some of the breaches that they've been responsible for, it's been outstanding what they've done. And you just wonder how the hell are you going to do? How can you fight that? It's a challenge. But I think we are going to start making progress. It will, it is a battle, and I think we'll start to see some gains over the next few years. And but it is going to be an ongoing battle, I think, for the foreseeable future.
Sure. Well, in this particular battle, there's no one else that I'd rather have in my corner than Glenn Wilson. So I don't know if anybody heard early on in the interview here when Glenn threw out that he was at the what was it, the International Boxing Tribute? What was it?
Fame. The International Boxing
Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame. And Glenn, there's also some. I mean, you hold some boxing records, don't you? I'm trying to remember from Japan.
Oh, not boxing, but yeah. So I was a British champion in powerlifting. back in the
Yeah,
day.
powerlifting. That's right.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Powerlifting.
And then I boxed. I had 3 fights as a boxer, just to see what it was like.
Yeah.
And then, as you know, I took up running as a result of boxing. So I went from being
Yes.
a powerlifter to a runner. So
That's right.
yeah.
Very nice. Well, Glenn, it's been great to have you on the show. Obviously, this is a very important issue that we're talking about here, and it's good to hear that that as cybersecurity is being developed, and and going into the future, that continuous improvement is a part of that process, and that that you are working on software that's going to be secure. And not compromise flow and continuous improvement, as your book talks about. If anybody's interested to get a copy of your book, where would they go? Where's the best place to grab a copy?
Yeah, the best place to grab a copy would be on Amazon. It's in Kindle version, and it's also paperback version. So Amazon's the best place to go.
Okay.
I've got a small collection of signed books that I can send out, and if you wanted a copy of a signed copy, then they can reach me on possibly LinkedIn would be the best place, and I can sort something out for them. And LinkedIn is probably the best place to converse with me about anything else as well.
Okay, and we'll make sure that we put both of those links into the show notes. So if anyone wants to get a hold of you, Glenn, they can go right to the show notes. They'll find a link to your book as well as a link to your LinkedIn page, and they can reach out to you there. Well, it's been great to have you on, Glenn. Good to catch up after Japan. Looking forward to continuing our relationship and working together in the future.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure to see you again, Patrick, and thank you very much for inviting me on to talk on your podcast.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Lean Solutions Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe. This way you'll get updates as new episodes become available. If you feel so inclined, please give us a review. Thank you so much.